Last week, we got what is possibly the best episode of JJK so far, with Maki slaughtering the entire Zenin clan, which is so satisfying. But since this episode has dropped, Twitter has been on fire with anime fans doing what anime fans do best, and that is comparing things more than they enjoy them, because they need to prove to some people for some reason that their anime is better than the other. And this got me thinking about the long-standing question, because it is the topic of contention on Twitter currently, of whether or not One Piece actually has well-written female characters. And I'm just gonna come out and say it real quick. It does. Yes, One Piece does have well-written female characters. The problem, however, is that Oda does not, or doesn't, handle these well-written female characters very well. And with this video, my goal is to first establish the difference between being a well-written character and the handling of a well-written character, with examples from different animes, of course, that we've seen. JJK will be one of them. I'm sorry, like, it's the one that is most relevant to this scenario. But with all that out the way, I do want to say thank you guys so much for the support you've been showing. You know, keep subscribing, keep liking, keep commenting. I read every comment, believe it or not. But with all out the way, let's get it done. So first off, before we get too deep into this video, I do want to clarify what it means to handle a character well, and then just being a well-written character in general, you know, because this is a pretty opinion-heavy video, and I feel like we need some form of common ground to meet up at, you know. And to do this, I will be using Google just to establish that universal baseline and try to exclude, again, as much of my own opinion as possible. So a well-written character refers to the depth and authenticity of the character. Think their personality and their motivations throughout the story. Whereas how you handle a character refers to how they are used within the story, you know, within the present story, that is. Think about the role that they play within the present story, how they push it forward, or maybe even just how they support the main character to, again, push the story forward. You know, and I will of course compare this to other anime and how they handle women, because it's important to have references for these types of things. You know, we need to look back and forth at what we're looking at, you know. So with that established, I do want to say that pre-time skip, you know, characters like Nami, I do think they were just used not just better but more. You know, I know people love to say it's due to the power creep that happened during One Piece, or is happening in One Piece, but Oda has tried to level up Nami and Robin without giving them the one thing that I think they actually need to compete within the new world, which is Haki. You know, according to Kaido, which he's right, Haki does transcend all. You got a broken devil fruit, Haki. You got immortality, Haki. You got your car broke down, your shit broke, Haki. I don't know what to tell you. Haki does all, you know. And this is quite literally, again, the most crucial thing within the new world, especially where we are in the story currently on Elbaf with the Holy Knights. You know, the guys that you need Haki to not even just kill, because you can't kill them, just immobilize them for a little bit, you know. But during the pre-time skip era, you know, I think you could get away with just having cool devil fruit powers, or in Nami's case, a unique power set, right? And I remember within the OG5 of all those characters, you know, Nami's fights were some of the coolest and just most creative fights that I'd seen in the whole series, and honestly in a lot of series at that point. You know, the fight with Absalom, where he's using his I can't remember what the name of his fruit is. I don't think it's the mirror, that's Brule. She has a mirror fruit, but he goes invisible, you know, the one that one guy on Blackbeard's crew has now, where she uses her Mirage Tempo against him on Thriller Bark to confuse him, because it causes him to, I think it caused him to reveal himself, because he couldn't see which Nami was the correct Nami, or I think she did like mess with light waves. I can't exactly remember. But, you know, her fights had a sense of creativity behind them. They were the most unique out of all the Straw Hats, if I'm being honest. Her weather-based abilities not being dependent on a devil fruit was so interesting at the time, because pre-time skip, devil fruits were just absolutely broken, especially if you have a Logia fruit, you know? Not to mention that Nami actually just had relevant and more impactful defeats within the pre-time skip era. Think about the fight back to Miss Doublefinger, you know, in Alabasta. There's Khalifa, which was a pretty big one, and Eni's Lobby. And there's also the fact that her being a thief was just generally used more. You know, Nami wasn't just the navigator, while the throughout that time. While this is a useful thing, it isn't exactly played up as much as it used to be, which is definitely due to the fact that we aren't really at sea as much as we used to be. You know, they're kind of on a set course, if you will. You know, the islands that they're going to are kind of predetermined, so there's not really much thinking that Nami has to do anymore. She's not deciding where they're gonna go. It's not really, I don't want to say it's not an adventure anymore, but it's not more so an exploration in how it used to be, right? It's not just we're going to random islands anymore. It's like, no, we're on a set path to get Luffy to become the king of the pirates, obviously, which does make sense. But Nami doesn't have to make those decisions anymore. She just gets you there, which again is important, but she's not as autonomous, I will say, as she used to be, you know? Moving over now, I want to say that Robin doesn't really have a lot of relevant fights pre-time skip, which could be the fact of when she joined, because she joined after Alabasta, and then going into after Alabasta we went into that whole Enies Lobby saga, which she wasn't really a fighter in there. And then after that, the crew kind of got split up. Like, there was not really any time for Robin to have these crazy relevant fights, you know? And it's also due to the fact that her devil fruit is pretty broken on paper. You know, the ability to conjure hands anywhere on somebody is an automatic win condition for her, because you can just conjure, snap your neck. That's it. I know they don't use it for that for some reason, but whatever. I think it's done once, and it's only used on Spandam or Spondam. It's never used like that again, really, unless it's fodder. You know, I will acknowledge her fight with Black Maria, which was definitely a nice subversion throughout the story, with her having to save Sanji versus Sanji always having to save her and Nami. And this is because of the fact that Sanji doesn't hit women. And this is honestly made me think of one thing, though, throughout that entire fight, is why doesn't Robin have Haki? You know, I know a lot of people ask this, but it's a relevant question. Why doesn't Nico Robin have Haki? She was one of the most dangerous women on the entire planet. Why doesn't she have Haki? You know, imagine her using her fruit as an extension of herself, which, you know, she usually does, but applying armament Haki towards it, you know? Just think about that. If you do it too much, you know, it doesn't make sense. If you think about why she doesn't have it, it makes zero sense throughout the story. She stayed with the Revolutionary Army for 2 years. Yeah, those 2 years, that time skip, that's where she was, with the Revolutionary Army. I know she was learning, I guess, about, you know, her archaeology stuff, which is really cool and really relevant, actually. Her being the archaeologist of the crew is very relevant. I don't want to discount that from her. But Sawa was right there. He's the closest thing that they have to a Haki man, you know, pre-flame fruit. And he's still Haki man with the flame fruit. He just applies fire to his Haki hand. It's still doing the same thing, it just burns you. You know, compare this now to women from, you know, other anime, namely Maki, because that's the topic of discussion from JJK. Her story is not only relevant and makes changes within the world, she's also relevant within the world itself. Her wiping out the entire Zenin clan created a large rift in Jujutsu society, because while the Zenin clan aren't really anything special themselves, the fact that the fact that there's only 2 of them left is a pretty big thing, because they have at least 2 of the most powerful curse techniques within the entire series, with the 10 shadows and the heavenly restriction. And those were relative, or put up some type of fight against the Limitless and the Six Eyes, which, you know, I guess for the heavenly restriction they have to be a setup, but let's be honest here, bro. Anybody outside of Gojo, they're not handling Toji. Sukuna's handling Toji. I'm gonna put that out there. Sukuna's handling Toji. Post series, honestly, I will think right up until the fight with Gojo and Sukuna, everybody after that is handling Toji. People before that, I don't think they're handling Toji. I'm gonna keep it a band with you. I do think Toji could put up some type of fight against Yuta. I don't think he'd win, but I do think he could put up a fight against Yuta. I'm gonna just put that out there. I will say, I know that heavenly restriction isn't technically a thing that's unique to them. Other people can have other forms of heavenly restriction, but they're the only ones we've seen do it to that level. Not to mention that in the final fight against Sukuna, she was still hanging with Sukuna. Now, I don't want to say she was gonna beat Sukuna, because God knows she wasn't, you know, but it was so much so that Sukuna himself took an interest in her during the fight, and we know that's actually a very hard thing to do, you know. And I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you that Gege is the best with his female cast. I'm looking at you, Miwa, and Nobara post Shibuya. Like, it's actually crazy what happened. But the thing is, though, the women aren't used in relation to the men of the story, which is a huge problem in One Piece. The women are always used in relation to the men of the story. But with that, we're gonna back on topic here. So before we do move on to writing, I do want to acknowledge the more powerful women post time skip within One Piece who do have Conqueror's Haki, which are only 3 of them. It's gonna be Big Mom, Boa Hancock, and Yamato. Even though Yamato does not identify as a woman, I'm speaking from a biological standpoint. Like, biologically, Yamato was born as a girl. Now compare this to the other 25 characters who are male, who have Conqueror's Haki. And while I do understand the pirate world itself is heavily male dominated, so it makes sense. It makes so much sense that there be more males with Conqueror's Haki throughout One Piece. But bro, Don Chin Zhao has Conqueror's Haki. I don't even want to say Eustace Kid, but Don Chin Zhao, a pretty much irrelevant character who was realistically used to upscale Luffy, has Conquerors. And you're telling me that Charlotte Smoothie doesn't have Conqueror's Haki? She's one of the sweet commanders. What do you mean she doesn't have Conquerors? It doesn't make sense to me. None of the female vice admirals have Haki. None of the ones in Sword, or not Haki, Conqueror's Haki. None of the ones in Sword have Conquerors. But I guarantee you Kobe's gonna have it. I guarantee you Kobe's gonna have Conqueror's Haki. Granted, they do have Haki in general, so they have observation Haki and armament Haki. But one thing I will say about Oda, though, is that he's very good at writing women well. They have great motivations and backstories as to what they do. Think about Nami, Robin, Big Mom, Yamato, etc. They all have stellar backstories. I love their backstories, some still relevant to this day. Robin being the sole survivor of Ohara is a driving thing for her entire character. She goes on this run. It's such a tragic thing. When you really think about Robin's backstory, it's so tragic. It's such a tragedy. And she's hunted by the world government for literal decades. And now it's still being paid off with her seeing Saul on Elbaf. Spoilers, by the way. I'm sorry. Let's put it out there. It's a One Piece video. You're gonna get spoiled a little bit. But things like that are being paid off. And it is also important to her character because that sets her up to be the last scholar of Ohara. She is one of the only people in the entire world who can read the road poneglyphs. But at the same time, I think because she was obviously misbountied, I'll say that. She was misbountied for the fact of not her power, but her knowledge. But her working alongside Crocodile and being as dangerous as she was, because she was seen as a legitimate threat during the Alabasta arc or the Alabasta saga, I do think Robin should have some relative upscale. I think Robin should be top 5 Straw Hat. I'm gonna put that out there. I think Robin needs to be top 5 Straw Hat, And Yamato's fight with Kaido in the anime was genuinely one of the best things I'd ever seen. I love that. The devil fruit, her devil fruit being busted was just amazing to me. I loved that. And even though these characters do have such well done backstories, they always fall back on a male character in some way. There's Boa Hancock, who's supposed to be the defender of Amazon Lily, because that's what the Pirate Empress, I think is what they call that title, or the Empress of Amazon Lily does. But as soon as Blackbeard shows up, who, don't get me wrong, is a threat in himself, he defeated Law, she needs Rayleigh to show up. And while I do love the scene, it's a really awesome scene, it's tough as hell, show me the ladies of Amazon Lily outsmarting Blackbeard somehow. Like, I don't need them to defeat Blackbeard because it doesn't really take away from his threat, but I mean, he's supposed to be some kind of an idiot in a way, kind of like Luffy's an idiot. But then there's Big Mom, arguably the most powerful female character in the entire story thus far. Why does she need to team up with Kaido to handle 3 relatively new pirates? And sure, they are a threat, but we know that they're a threat. We know that they're a threat. We're the audience. It's one of those things where they still see them as lesser. And I know the rest of her crew was trying to get back to Wano, so she was kind of nerfed in that way because they failed. But at the same time, I don't need you to put the most powerful women, the most powerful woman in the story in relation to Kaido, who's the most powerful beast or thing within the story. I don't need that. I would love to have seen, that thing. Because remember when Luffy was escaping damn it, what's the world what's the her country, I'm gonna just say her country, Whole Cake Island. There we go. When Luffy was escaping Whole Cake Island, Big Mom vowed that on it. Wait, hold up. No, since Fishman Island, Luffy and Big Mom have had beef since Fishman Island. I needed Big Mom and a 1v1 with Luffy, a proper Luffy and Big Mom 1v1. I didn't need them to team up on Wano to do that. While the story is good and I love it, I don't think Luffy definitely would not have beat her on Whole Cake. But we could have had another arc where maybe, you know, let's say we get through Wano. And then Big Mom shows up while Luffy's weakened. And then Luffy has to, you know, find something in him to defend the people of Wano. And then everyone stands up with Luffy against Big Mom or something. I don't know. I'm not the writer of One Piece. Oda could have planned it better. Oda can do it better than what I'm talking about. I'm not the writer. There's a reason I'm not the writer. But yeah, that's why I didn't like that. And then there's Yamato, who is the only one who actually stands on their own, if we're being honest, and that they don't even really identify as a woman, so maybe that saved them from getting that same fate, you know. But the big problem with One Piece is that while it does have the ingredients for powerful female characters and great female characters, I think One Piece has, as I've said before, stellarly done female characters in terms of writing, the writing department. I can never take that away from Oda. They always subverted this in relation to a man. You know, once Oda, I think, finds a way to fix this, he can finally beat the misogyny allegations. You know, we're not gonna get into any of that stuff with Oda, but maybe that twist with Emu being a girl could work, and that could, you know, make the story a little bit better. But so far, I do think while yes, One Piece has well-written female characters, they're not handled very well, and I do think we need to stop comparing them to other anime where the female characters are both well-written and well-handled. I do think it takes away from our story because there's more in One Piece, you know, and that's just things that we need to talk about. But whatever, that's the video. And you know, of course, you know, I didn't talk about everything that I could have because I'm trying to condense this down a little bit, but I do hope you guys enjoyed it, and I want to thank you guys so much for helping me at 1,000 watch hours. We just officially hit 1,000 watch hours today. We're past it. By tomorrow we'll probably be at like 1,100, but I want to thank you guys so much for the support that you've been showing. You know, please consider leaving a like, commenting, subscribing. You know, we're still trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, so please continue to be with me on this journey. We're gonna make it. I'm telling you, by the end of the year, we're gonna go crazy. I love you. Goodbye.